Hi everyone, my name is Emily, and today we're going to be talking about some of the prominent figures, and today we're going to be talking about some of the prominent figures and deities within Mesoamerican religion and Aztec culture. And so one of the figures we're going to be looking at here is this image of the Coyolxauhqui monolith. It was discovered in 1978, so still roughly recent. It's not that old of a discovery, it's still fairly new. But she was discovered in 1978 in Tenochtitlan, which is the main temple for the Aztec culture. And that's located in what we know now as Mexico City. And so the actual monolith is about 10 feet in diameter, so it's very large. And it sits in the Templo Mayor Museum in Mexico City, right next door to what's left of Tenochtitlan. And so what's so interesting too about the Coyolxauhqui monolith is that there's actually 7 at one point that were in existence. But first we're going to talk about the detailing and the myth. So right away you can see the details in Coyolxauhqui and her body. And one of the most important details is actually these bells that are on her cheeks. Her name, Coyolxauhqui, translates to bells on her cheeks. And so when anthropologists first discovered her in Tenochtitlan, they had a pretty good indication of who this was depicting. Many of the depictions of Coyolxauhqui within the Aztec culture will have those bells on her cheeks because of her name. And so as you look a little closer, you can definitely see the large headdress, the large ear spools that are also associated with prominence within the Aztec culture. And you can see lots of red. This is roughly what the coloring would have looked like when it was first painted and sculpted. All of the red depicts just pools of blood. And as you take a closer look, you can see that her limbs are actually completely detached from her body and she's been decapitated. And so Dr. Ebink actually points out those very clear storytelling details. You can see the bones protruding out. It isn't just a lot of limbs and body parts, it's actually scalloping that depicts torn flesh and bones protruding and the decapitation. And so Dr. Ebink gives us an account of the myth. And so essentially what took place was that Coyolxauhqui had a mother and her name was Coatlicue. Coatlicue means snaky skirt, snakes on her skirt. And so Coatlicue, the mother, was on top of Snake Mountain, sweeping, tidying, and out of the sky came this ball of feathers that actually impregnated Coatlicue. So she became pregnant, and Coyolxauhqui was very upset and just irate about her mom's pregnancy. And so she ordered her 400 brothers, who were soldiers, to go to Snake Mountain and kill Coatlicue. And so as this was happening, and the soldiers were going to kill Coatlicue, out of her was birthed Huitzilopochtli. So that ball of feathers that impregnated her, the myth says that he sprang out of her. So he was born. And Huitzilopochtli is the Aztec god of the sun and war. And so to protect Coatlicue, his mother, he killed his sister Coyolxauhqui. He decapitated her and he pushed her body down the side of the mountain. And as her body was rolling and falling down the side of the mountain, she landed at the base and her body became completely dismembered and completely mangled. And so that's the image we're seeing on the Coyolxauhqui monolith, is this image of Coyolxauhqui's dismembered body falling to the base of Snake Mountain. And so before, like I said, there at one point were 7 of these monoliths in existence. So when Coyolxauhqui was first discovered by anthropologists who excavated, they found her on the side of the temple that was dedicated to Huitzilopochtli. So if you're looking at the temple, the right side was dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war. And the left side was dedicated to Tlaloc, which we'll get into. But on the Huitzilopochtli side, or rather the entire temple, anthropologists were actually able to excavate and determine that between 1325 and 1521, there had been 7 rebuildings of the temple. So they were expansions. It was built on top of the old, so it gradually got bigger. And each time they expanded the temple and rebuilt, they would actually bury the existing version of the monolith, which is, would become the previous version. they would bury the monolith, and as they rebuilt the temple, they would place a new one in the same place at the base of the Huitzilopochtli side of the temple. And so Dr. Eubank actually talks about this monthly festival that the Aztec people had. It was called the Panquetzalitzli, which is the raising of the banners. It was this monthly festival, and war captives were brought to the top of the Huitzilopochtli side of the temple, and they were decapitated and made as offerings to Huitzilopochtli in the same way that Coyolxauhqui was decapitated. They were made as offerings, and so when they were decapitated, their bodies would be pushed down the side of the stairs to land on the Coyolxauhqui monolith as an honoring and reenactment of what happened between Coyolxauhqui and Huitzilopochtli. And so the right side being Huitzilopochtli's side of the temple, the left side, as I said earlier, was the side dedicated to Tlaloc, which is known as the god of rain and agriculture. And so here you can see these big eyes and the fanged teeth. These are key features, as Dr. Eubank points out, of the Tlaloc image. And what's so important about Tlaloc is that he was not only a prominent figure for the Aztec culture, but he was actually a prominent deity for many Mesoamerican cultures outside of the Aztec people. So the Mayans and other Mesoamerican cultures. So here's another image again, and you see the same thing. It's these large round eyes and these fanged teeth, and this beautiful blue color. And so you can kind of see both of them. They both have this beautiful blue color that's attributed to water and agriculture and rain. And to create some kind of context to it as well, Dr. Eubank talks about the scenery of what it looked like when Mexico City had not yet been conquered by Spanish and European settlers. And so what we know of Mexico City today is lots of pavement and cityscape, but actually in roughly 1524, there's a rendering of what the landscape looked like in the Templo Mayor Museum. Anthropologists actually have been able to determine that the temple and Tenochtitlan was sitting on an island, and it was surrounded by a large body of water and lush vegetation and forests and agriculture. And so that was their entire life. It was all about growth and agriculture and rain and abundance. And so it makes sense with that context that Tlaloc would be such an important, prominent deity, because it pretty much encompassed their entire life and that whole theme of agriculture and water and abundance. And so when they found this dedication to Tlaloc, they actually found him buried in the temple with other offerings that are associated with water, like seashells and aquatic animals. And so there definitely is a theme all around Tlaloc of water and vegetation. And with the two halves of the temple, so you have the Huitzilopochtli side of the temple and you have the Tlaloc side of the temple together, their symbols and their importance and their imagery combined is burnt water, which is the Aztec symbol for war. And so it really embodies together these two important themes for the Aztec culture. And so those are some of the art renderings that I chose. I do find it incredibly fascinating, just all of the storytelling and the importance, and also to learn that Mexico City was not what it's known as today. Just all of the water and the vegetation, and just to know that the culture that existed before what we know now is just entirely different. And so that's my teaching of the Mesoamerican religion and some prominent figures within the Aztec culture.